On the morning of April 27 last year, Afghan Air Force Col. Hamid Gul walked into a control room on the Afghan military side of the Kabul International Airport. He was armed with a Smith & Wesson pistol provided by the United States military. Within minutes, 8 U.S. Air Force advisors and an American contractor were shot dead. The advisors were executed with bullets to the head. The 9 killings remain the single deadliest incident among insider attacks that have targeted U.S. and coalition forces in Afghanistan. An Air Force investigation concluded that Gul, who had been radicalized by Islamist extremists, acted alone. The preliminary report by U.S. Central Command recommended enhanced vetting procedures for Afghan forces and stronger base security measures for American military personnel training Afghan soldiers and police. Widows of 2 of the dead officers, along with a former Air Force legal officer, are convinced that Gul had help from fellow Afghan officers. "You'd have to suspend disbelief to assume one Afghan airman could shoot and kill 9 Americans, 8 of them armed and well-trained," said retired Air Force Lieutenant Col. Sally Stenton, the former civilian police investigator who was a legal officer assigned to the airport the day of the attack. The 3 women contend that the Air Force failed to uncover Gul's radicalization in Pakistan and Kabul, and the vows he made to kill Americans. Although insider attacks in Afghanistan are persistent, at least 80 attacks and 122 coalition deaths since 2007, no single incident seems to have registered on the public consciousness in the United States. Few family members of those killed have spoken out. The number of attacks and deaths has risen each year. There were 2 attacks and 2 deaths in 2007, 21 attacks and 35 deaths last year, 42 attacks and 58 deaths so far this year, including 35 Americans. Stenton and the 2 widows have accused the Air Force of not providing proper security at the facility. They say procedures put in place since the attack have failed to stem the rash of killings by America's purported allies. "The American government is putting a band-aid on the issue," said retired Air Force Captain Susanna Osborne, whose husband, Air Force Met Jeffrey Osborne, was killed at the airport. Miriam Nylander Hamilton, the former Air Force enlistee whose husband, Captain Nathan Nylander, also died that April morning, said the U.S. military was continuing to expose its forces to turncoat Afghan security force members, or insurgents posing as army or police. She said her husband told her that commanders emphasized maintaining good relations with Afghans, rather than focusing on advisors' security. Osborne, Hamilton and other widows have petitioned Congress for a new investigation while raising questions about the official Air Force version of the killings. The 2 widows and Stenton have pored over the redacted Air Force report, the Central Command report and a separate Air Force chronology. They point out that 14 Afghans were in the control room when Gul opened fire. None were killed or seriously wounded. The U.S. Air Force investigation quoted Afghans as saying they fled or took cover when Gul opened fire. The reports, the 3 women said, indicated the Afghans did not attempt to rescue or treat the wounded advisors. An Afghan Air Force colonel told investigators he thought Gul had a connection to a terrorist cell because the attack was too coordinated to be a random act. One of Gul's relatives told U.S. investigators that Gul, while in Pakistan between 2006 and 2008, was radicalized at a mosque. Gul was angry that foreigners had invaded Afghanistan and told family members he wanted to kill Americans, the relative said. After returning to Afghanistan in 2008, Gul fell under the influence of the radical, anti-American mosque in Kabul, according to his supervisor, an Afghan colonel. Gul's views were boiling over and extreme, the colonel told investigators. According to the Air Force report, Gul opened fire while standing inside the control room. Osborne was one of the first 2 Americans shot. Gul then shot 5 more Air Force advisors, including a female sergeant and an American civilian contractor. Gul paused to reload and retrieve the pistol of the U.S. Air Force lieutenant colonel he had shot. The Americans in an adjoining conference room ran into a hallway, where 2 U.S. Air Force captains, including Nathan Nylander, drew their weapons. Nylander was wounded in both thighs and subsequently shot in the head by Gul. Investigators concluded that Nylander's handgun had jammed during the shootout. The other captain was not injured. Gul was wounded and retreated down a hallway. Investigators believe he paused to write "God is the only one" in blood on a wall. He went upstairs and apparently shot himself in the chest and left side, possibly after being wounded by an Afghan military response team.